Hey guys, welcome to the Liberal Hive Mind, a channel solely focused on exposing the abundant hypocrisy of the left. Finally, some judicial sanity here, and also the cherry on top, a little bit of a redemption arc for Amy Coney Barrett. I mean, I've been quite vocal of my disappointment with Amy Coney Barrett and some of her decisions. She seems to be a little bit of a bleeding heart Republican who on many sensitive issues seems to side with the Democrats and their emotional narratives rather than the Constitution. But you know, we're gonna let bygones be bygones and just assess the today and now. And when it comes to today and now, well, Amy Coney Barrett, ACB, just delivered one of the most brutal legal smackdowns that we've seen in recent Supreme Court history. And the beauty is, she did it all in one single sentence, packing a whole lot of substance in a very short little excerpt. Amy Coney Barrett stirs up a little bit of drama on the bench, directly calling out Ketanji Brown Jackson. We are talking about a savage rebuke of KBJ, now written into, embedded in the court opinion. Let me show you guys exactly what happened, and then of course, let's talk about this particular ruling, because it's some of the biggest news we've gotten all year, and I don't think I'm exaggerating. The Supreme Court has officially decided that these lower-level federal judges no longer have the ability to deal in these nationwide injunctions, blocking the president's policy agenda left, right, and center. In other words, this is absolutely freaking massive. Let me show you guys exactly what's going on. We got some stuff to get into, so let's roll the tape. All right, folks, so let's break it down. Let's start off with Justice Barrett, who wrote this: "We will not dwell on Justice Jackson's argument, which is at odds with more than 2 centuries worth of precedent. Not to mention the Constitution itself, we observe only this, that Justice Jackson decries an imperial executive while embracing an imperial judiciary." In one sentence, Barrett torched Jackson's entire dissent as not just wrong, but historically and constitutionally bankrupt. She's breaking down the entire contradictory worldview of the left. You know, to take this legalese and translate it into plain English, she's basically saying that Ketanji Brown Jackson wants to strip power from the president when it's politically convenient, and then hand over the power to unelected judges, like herself, who are supposed to be neutral interpreters of the Constitution. That is raw, partisan ideology masquerading as legal thought. In other words, she's identifying, in my view, the core issue with people like Justice Jackson. She was never nominated for her legal brilliance. No, that was clearly on display during her nomination hearing. No, she was nominated because she checked boxes. And clearly it shows her dissents tend to read like MSNBC blog posts, for Pete's sakes, as if she's an opinion writer, doing her best Rachel Maddow impersonation. But going back to the whole Ketanji Brown Jackson was picked because she checks boxes, a lot of people might be saying, well, identity boxes, right? DEI, which I'm sure plays a role, but no, the most important thing is, let's call it the Karine Jean-Pierre element, absolute blind loyalty to the party. Whatever the Democrat Party needs in the moment, that's the decision that comes down. Ketanji Brown Jackson's loyalty lies with the Democrat Party and not to the Constitution. And that's kind of a problem as a sitting Supreme Court justice, don't you think? I mean, just look at her stance on free speech.
So my biggest concern is that your view has the First Amendment hamstringing the government in significant ways in the most important time periods. I mean, what would you have the government do? I've heard you say a couple times that the government can post its own speech, but in my hypothetical, kids, this is not safe, don't do it, is not going to get it done. And so I guess some might say that the government actually has a duty to take steps to protect the citizens of this country, and you seem to be suggesting that that duty cannot manifest itself in the government encouraging or even pressuring platforms to take down harmful information. So can you help me? Because I'm really worried about that, because you've got the First Amendment operating in an environment of threatening circumstances from the government's perspective, and you're saying that the government can't interact with the source of those problems.
This woman actually believes that we need regulation on speech that is, quote, harmful. In other words, she doesn't believe in the First Amendment in principle. No, only when it doesn't make her feel bad or other people feel bad. And this is somebody that's sitting on the highest court of the land. Honestly, it's absolutely shameful. And I think that's at the core of Amy Coney Barrett's comments here. That's why they hit so hard. Because essentially now it's logged into the history. It's written in a Supreme Court decision. In other words, we've now got logged logged into the history books the public exposure of Ketanji Brown Jackson's entire facade. She is a partisan actor, a mouthpiece for the activist left that's simply wearing the robe of a Supreme Court justice. But anyways, now moving on from the drama, let's go to the actual decision itself. We got a major win here for President Trump, folks. After months of constant lawfare and judicial obstruction, the Supreme Court has finally ruled in favor of ending the endless cycle of partisan injunctions.
Well, this was a big one, wasn't it? This morning, the Supreme Court has delivered a monumental victory for the Constitution, the separation of powers, and the rule of law in striking down the excessive use of nationwide injunctions to interfere with the normal functioning of the executive branch. The Supreme Court has stopped the presidency itself. That's what they've done. And really, it's been an amazing period of time this last hour. There are people elated all over the country. I've seen such happiness and spirit. Sometimes you don't see that, but this case is very important. I was elected on a historic mandate, but in recent months we've seen a handful of radical left judges effectively try to overrule the rightful powers of the president to stop the American people from getting the policies that they voted for in record numbers. It was a grave threat to democracy, frankly, and instead of merely ruling on the immediate cases before them, these judges have attempted to dictate the law for the entire nation. In practice, this meant that if any one of the nearly 700 federal judges disagreed with the policy of a duly elected president of the United States, he or she could block that policy from going into effect or at least delay it for many years, tie it up in the court system. This was a colossal abuse of power which never occurred in American history prior to recent decades, and we've been hit with more nationwide injunctions than were issued in the entire 20th century together. Think of it, more than the entire 20th century. Me.
Good, and I think President Trump's words were quite succinct. You know, this president has had to deal with more nationwide injunctions thrown at him in the past few months than every other president over the last, I think, 100 years combined. It's completely freaking insane and out of control. We got these unelected judges in blue districts who have been trying to override the will of the people and shut down the presidency through their legal technicalities. And that's obviously been the whole thing here, right? Lawfare? That's why the people at MSNBC are losing their frickin' minds.
This is a really huge win for the Trump administration. I'm glad that we're talking about it in those terms, because I think one of the great fears with this case was that if the court did not say anything about the substance and scope of the 14th Amendment, media would say that the court had saved birthright citizenship. The court has not saved birthright citizenship. It simply kicked that can down the line and made the legal conditions under which a future suit over birthright citizenship can actually be resolved. This is a huge win for the Trump administration because the court has essentially kneecapped lower courts from stopping this administration when it engages in lawless and unconstitutional behavior. This is all happening in an environment where the Trump administration is not only going after undocumented persons and deporting people without the benefit of due process, they're doing so while they are also upending the legal landscape, but making it harder for pro bono outfits to secure the help they need from law firms to bring these suits. And now with this decision, they're essentially saying that litigants will have to file in each particular jurisdiction around the United States in order to be clear that their resolution will have legally binding effect. That means you're just going to need a flood, an army of lawyers at a time when that army of lawyers is not going to be forthcoming. So make no mistake about this. The court has given this administration an enormous win. They have put one hand behind the backs of those who are trying to fight against this administration, and they have dealt a death blow to the rule of law.
Yeah, it's obvious why they're so freaking pissed, because the Democrats can no longer engage in lawfare to stop this president. No, instead they have to actually win elections now to secure their own mandate if they don't like what the current duly elected president is doing. In other words, democracy has now been restored. The Democrats hate democracy. It's clear, isn't it? You know, we got these Democrats constantly preaching about saving democracy. Oh, we're saving democracy. One corrupt legal act at a time. But what they really mean is they're saving their own power. They don't want elections. They don't want voters. No. Nowadays, they just want judges. That's good enough for them. And another thing is clear. They don't want debate. No, they want censorship. They just want control. Control at any cost. And they don't care about attaining that control by majority rule. No, they just want it. They're just entitled to it because they have a D next to their name. Well, unfortunately for them, democracy is punched back as President Trump yet again scores another major legal victory. Remember when Hakeem Jeffries told us that Donald Trump was losing in the courts and being totally humiliated? Yeah, it's kind of funny considering he's won, like over 90% of these cases? Well, here comes another victory, and Amy Coney Barrett coming in with the cherry on top, absolutely torching Joe Biden's auto-pen Supreme Court nominee. You gotta love to see it, and most importantly, you gotta love what's coming. This president, in terms of action, in terms of fulfilling the mandate, has just been fully unleashed. Anyways, that's pretty much what I got for you guys. Hopefully you enjoyed it. If you did, make sure to leave a like and possibly subscribe. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you on the next one.